Sacred Steve here with Joyful Juice, and I wanted to tell everybody my story about how I overcame acne using a control volume and a juicer. And some of you might be asking, what the heck is a control volume? And some people may know out there what a control volume is if you're into physics or engineering, but most people probably have no idea what a control volume is. So let me tell you a little bit about my story, and then we'll get into what a control volume is and how using that and a juicer and actually going raw vegan completely cured me of my acne. I started first getting acne when I was a teenager, about 13 years old, and didn't know how to overcome it. You know, my parents didn't know. It just was one of those facts of life, you know. And so I thought to myself, well, okay, maybe after a few years it'll just go away by itself. And it didn't look good, and it actually hurt, and I didn't enjoy it, but I lived with it. And I think a lot of people out there just live with it, right? You go to the doctor, they give you maybe some sort of medications. Sometimes it helps a little bit, sometimes it doesn't. So finally, after I got into college and I was into my early 20s, and I noticed that my acne wasn't going away. And I had acne mostly on my back, all around my torso, sometimes on my thighs, definitely on my face. And it was just annoying. You know, it made me self-conscious, and I didn't like it. And so I went to some doctors, actually at Stanford Medical Center, and I said, hey, what's causing this acne, and how can I get rid of it? And they didn't know. They were stumped. They said, well, it just kind of depends on your skin. And I thought to myself, that's just crazy. How can we be living in this modern day and age and nobody, even the top doctors, don't know like what causes acne? And they said, well, sometimes it's an infection, sometimes it's a bacteria. So they didn't know. And it didn't make sense to me that I could put something on topically and somehow that would make it all go away. Because to me, looking at it, it was something coming out of my body, and it didn't seem like putting something on my body would all of a sudden change things from coming out of my body. So, I mean, that was just kind of my engineering mind working on the problem. So fast forward several years, I read a book, I think I mentioned in a previous video, written by Tony Robbins called Unlimited Power. It inspired me to get into juicing. And so I did it. I bought a juicer, I started juicing, and I got so into it, I was just basically surviving on juice. And I kind of stumbled on this by accident. I noticed that my skin was starting to clear up a little bit, and it kind of inspired me and motivated me to keep juicing. So I just kept juicing. I'd read another book, Fit for Life by Harvey and Marilyn Diamond, and after reading those two books, I kind of came to this conclusion on my own. This is back in 1993, that eating raw fruits and vegetables is probably the healthiest thing you could do. So I was already juicing them, so I thought, okay, well, I'll just keep juicing them, and then I'll keep eating them. And it seems like my acne is starting to go away. That's a good sign. And after a while, I really started thinking about it, because I was working as an engineer actually at the time on space station program for McDonnell Douglas down in Orange County, California. And so I was doing a lot of analysis, a lot of actual control volumes. And so what is a control volume? So a control volume is just an imaginary membrane that you encapsulate a volumetric space in. So, for example, you might be analyzing an engine or a motor. So you kind of put an imaginary sort of bag around the motor, if you will, and you analyze what's going through the bag and what's coming out of the bag. And you, as an engineer, you do all these balances. You do energy balances and mass balances, and so you can analyze the efficiency of engines and the amount of work an engine can do, and so on and so forth. So basically, if you're into physics or you're into engineering, you're probably familiar with a control volume, but it's basically just sort of a conceptual tool that's used to analyze what's going into a system and what's coming out of a system, both energy and mass. And so I thought to myself, as I was getting into juicing, well, I'm going to just imagine putting a control volume around my body. So that's what I did. I put a control volume around my body, and I just sort of analyzed, well, what's going into my body and what's coming out of my body? Well, in a steady state, meaning that nothing is changing with the body over time, except you have a constant influx and a constant outflux of mass, okay, then you get what's called steady state. So the body itself's not changing in my case, or the motor's not changing. It's running at a steady state. And so I thought, well, okay, we weren't born to have acne. So I didn't have acne as a little kid, for example. So I thought to myself, well, if I look at a control volume and I analyze what's going in and what's coming out, I should be able to basically sort of imagine, well, part of what's coming out is whatever, all this toxic stuff coming through as pimples and acne and zits and whiteheads and blackheads and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, well, given enough time, if I stop what's going in, eventually what's coming out is going to stop. That's just sort of the law of conservation of mass, or the law of conservation of energy, or both. And so that's what I did. I sort of thought, okay, I'm just going to only drink orange juice, for example, and see what happens. Because I thought to myself, my body is probably not converting orange juice into whatever's coming through my skin. And so I thought, over time, given enough time, whatever's coming through my skin will probably stop. And so sure enough, that's what happened. You know, I did 30 days of orange juice. This is way back in, oh gosh, December of 1993. And boom, all of my acne was gone. It wasn't coming through my skin at all. And I was actually blown away. I was kind of scratching my head and thinking, oh my God, this can't all just be diet. But in my case, it was. And I repeated the experiment time and time again. I went to eating just regular kind of food over the years. My acne would come back. I would go back to eating, say, raw vegan diet or just juicing or doing fast. My acne would go away. So in my particular case, with my skin type and my body, it was a function solely of what I was putting into my body. And perhaps, you know, maybe my liver was congested or other organs were congested, which were, you know, making the condition worse. But, you know, over time, by cleansing and eating fresh raw fruits and vegetables, you know, my organs probably got cleaned out, got back into balance. My organs were able to process what I was consuming efficiently, because ultimately when I look at, I realize that what's coming through my skin is, you know, undigested food particles, molecules that my body really didn't break down. And so my body doesn't know what to do with those molecules. They're floating through my blood. So the body's either going to eliminate it through bowels or through breath or through skin. The skin is one of the biggest eliminative organs of our bodies, you know, besides our lungs and our urinary tract, our bowels. So that whole system, as I was analyzing it in my mind from an engineering perspective, I realized that there was some sort of breakdown, some sort of inefficiency within my case, where I was eating stuff or drinking stuff, and for whatever reason, my body wasn't digesting it properly, breaking it down properly. You know, it wasn't utilizing it properly as energy. So there were a lot of things to think about and a lot of possibilities. And for different people, it might be slightly different. But overall, I would say that probably what you're consuming, if you have acne, is causing the acne. And basically, you can start a trial and error process to start eliminating things and eating things that are kind of cleaner, simpler, more pure, if you will, and using sort of trial and error, maybe rotate through different food items in your diet and see how that affects, you know, your skin and your skin's ability to, you know, properly be in a healthy state, basically. So ultimately, I think what it was with me is just coming to that realization, and this idea of a control volume, of putting this imaginary sort of membrane around me, allowed me to see, oh, what I'm putting in is got to balance out what's going out of my body. And as I changed the input, the output changed, right? Input goes in this way, output goes out that way, if you will. Change the input, the output changes. It was as simple as that. And so it turned out that the juicers helped me and the control volume helped me. And of course, cleaning up my diet, going the raw vegan route, totally solved the problem. So I was very grateful. Thanks for listening. I hope this helps. Subscribe, like if you like this information, and I'll keep sharing.